We are back yet again with the thiccmaninc podcast to give you our reactions to the AFC and NFC championship games. And starting things off, we are going to look at the Eagles beating the 49ers in a rather one-sided affair. And we all know why this game turned out the way it did. We all know the Eagles got beyond lucky. 49ers couldn't pass the ball for half the game. And as much of an offensive genius Kyle Shanahan is, how many weapons he has, if you can't throw the ball, it's pretty obvious where that ball's going. It's either going outside, inside, or to outside on the other side. But they were running it constantly. We knew what was going to happen. The Eagles knew what was going to happen. And because of that, their offense got great starting field position, got to go again and again and again at the 49ers defense, and eventually broke them down for 31 points. This was not an impressive showing by the Eagles, either offensively or defensively. I don't care who scored 31 points. If you're on the field for 40 minutes, you should score 31 points. They got lucky. Brock Purdy getting injured stinks. It's bad for football, and the Eagles really do not belong in the Super Bowl. I thought the 49ers had a very good job of winning this game. The Eagles have the better quarterback. That's about it. But not being able to pass the ball, it just goes right in hand with the Eagles being lucky, because they've been lucky all season. Soft schedule, easy 1 seed, easy easy divisional round matchup against the bum Giants, and now the best team on their schedule, the best team in the NFC, the one real other contender they could have faced, and they can run half their offense. It's an embarrassment for football. It really is a shame, mitigating circumstances. That being said, the Eagles did win there in the Super Bowl. There's not really much more to say.
Now, I would be lying if I went away from this game and I said that the Eagles showed nothing. They didn't demonstrate that they are a capable football team. The game was entirely all luck, entirely misfortune for the 49ers, and that's the reason the Eagles won, and that's the reason they're headed to the Super Bowl. However, there are some things that the Eagles did extremely well. Their edge rushers, Hassan Reddick, got after it. It's not like the 49ers were missing anyone on their offensive line. Their defensive line was a dominant force. They controlled the game. On the offensive side of the ball, the 49ers defense did what the 49ers defense does. It got some stops. It did make some key plays. But overall, I'd say the Eagles offensive line won that matchup. Lane Johnson, playing through an injury for most of the game, limited Nick Bosa, who also looked like he got banged up during the game, but that's besides the point. So from that perspective, it is encouraging when you see the Eagles front seven play as good as they did, and you see their offensive line play as good as they did. In the Giants game, which, it's a little bit different because it was the 9-win Giants that probably shouldn't be there, but they did it again against the 49ers, who are elite on those two sides of the ball. So if you're a fan of the Eagles, or just an objective NFL fan in general, you walk away from that game knowing the Eagles are 100% for real in their front seven and on their offensive line. You know they're real there. Now, what I think you'd be lying to yourself over the last two performances, and especially in this one, is that the offensive line, or the offense in general, is some elite powerhouse. I know they're playing the 49ers defense, best defense in football, but Jalen Hurts only threw for 125 yards, missed A.J. Brown by about a mile on a wide open touchdown pass, and they couldn't really throw the ball. They were not that great. Jalen Hurts was far from what he showed earlier in the regular season. So if we get a 100% Mahomes and Jalen Hurts next week, that's a different conversation, but I was not impressed at all from what I saw Hurts this week. The score was what it was, but they probably would have put up 50 or 60 if Jalen Hurts played to the level that he can and has played during this season. I know I just talked about how good the front seven was, but they were able to tee off on the 49ers because after the first quarter, they knew there's no chance they could even throw the ball. Josh Johnson was in shambles. There's a reason he played on 13 teams. The secondary wasn't tested. When they played the Giants, the secondary wasn't tested because of their receivers and they're playing Daniel Jones. When it comes to their secondary and pass rush in general, they haven't had to play an elite quarterback. We just don't know at this point. I don't leave the game being overly impressed with those aspects of the Eagles.
Dak Prescott gave this Eagles defense 40 points. Let's not forget about that. And to some extent, I agree with you. Their O-line played well. Helps when the defense is absolutely exhausted. Good bit helps. That helps when you don't have to pass it all. That will generally limit Nick Bosa's opportunity to get sacks. But the defense, look, it wasn't the offensive tackle which was blocking Hassan Reddick on his 2 sacks. For some reason, Kyle Shanahan lined up the backup tight end to stop one of the best edge rushers in football. I think that's on him. That's how Brock Purdy got hurt. They had their backup tight end blocking a force of nature on the outside, and that's what happened. So I'm not going to go all the way and say, I'm impressed by their front seven. It was a good performance, but I need to see this against a good team. And when they had to play someone like the Cowboys, a great offense, they got lit up. They couldn't generate pressure. I'm still unmoved. Again, the Eagles don't have an impressive win this year. They've got aspects of an impressive win. Their games, their defense plays well. Their games, their offense plays well, but they don't do it against elite teams, and they don't do it all at the same time. I wouldn't be overly confident if I was an Eagles fan.
Well, whether it would have been the Bengals or Chiefs who wound up winning that game, now we know who wins. We know who the Eagles are going to play, but it is going to be really interesting what the Eagles do when they have to play an elite passing attack in the Super Bowl next week. If Hurts can't go toe-to-toe in Mahomes, it will be a problem. And back to the Eagles 49ers, there's a lot of Eagles. Now, I know I just made the case for the Eagles that they still deserve to win. It's not like you can really say they would have been guaranteed to lose if Brock Purdy would have been playing back there. I'm still of the opinion, Eagles are the right victors. They should be in the Super Bowl. With that being said, the game would have been maybe a field goal game or a touchdown if Brock Purdy would have been healthy. The 49ers still showed a small ability to move the ball, and if they have Brock Purdy in there, he's started 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it's been, the game's a whole different ball game. It's a close game. Maybe that puts more pressure on Jalen Hurts to pass the ball. Maybe that makes him elevate his game in this one. And to the people that I've seen people really criticizing Josh Johnson, and yes, he's not the greatest quarterback. There's a reason he was on 13 teams, but also he joined midway through the season. I want to say I don't have the exact date that happened, but you're not preparing to play in you're not preparing to play in the conference championship. You don't think your starting quarterback, who's already your third string, is going to get injured. So in that respect,
look, I get what you're saying about Josh Johnson, but I'm going to stop there. He was terrible.
Why do you always cut me off?
He couldn't throw a spiral. Say what you want about him, but if you're an NFL quarterback, you're expected to be able to throw a spiral. There were points in the game he couldn't do that. He missed Christian McCaffrey 5 yards downfield behind him on a wobbly ball which didn't get deflected. Josh Johnson's a bum.
He is, but in the same respect, you're asking a quarterback who wasn't with the team in training camp, hasn't been with them that long this season, is playing in an incredibly loud environment. There's a reason. Those are the reasons he had a couple delay of games. I think there was penalties that if you have Brock Purdy in there, that's not going to happen because he's been within the offense for an extended period of time. So while Josh Johnson is not good, there's also that element of there. He wasn't prepared to play, and I think that was extremely evident. So I'm not saying he's a good quarterback, and he always cut me off, but I think that played into Josh Johnson's poor performance. Although he would have,
also got
it's not like he would have pulled it out.
10 attempts, so that probably didn't help things.
Yeah, and he wouldn't have pulled it out, but I think what I just talked about contributed to that less than stellar performance.
I think if you've been in the NFL for 13 years, you need to be able to run a game, get the ball going, and not throw terrible passes 5 yards downfield. Josh Johnson might be done with football, but hey, good for him. Made some money. 13 teams. Gotta be a millionaire. And finally, I'm going to touch on this with the Eagles and 49ers, and then we'll really get into the AFC Championship game. The refs were, didn't favor the 49ers. That Devontae Smith catch pretty clearly wasn't a catch. That should have been a turnover on downs. Instead, got the Eagles their first points. But the 49ers lost control, particularly defensively, and were committing costly penalty after costly penalty. They were never going to be able to get back in that game when they kept shooting themselves in the foot defensively. Some of them were questionable calls, but a lot of them were legit. Like Trent Williams hurling someone to the ground. That's a penalty. A lot of the pass interference calls, those were legit calls. You can't really blame the officials for this one. If you want to complain about Brock Purdy being out, that's one thing, but the refs were not what decided this game.
Yeah, the refs weren't what decided the game. I don't think a lot of serious people are going to make that argument. What I will say about the refs in this game is I don't think they were necessarily bad calls. I just think they're being extremely strict with some of their calls and how they reffed the entire game. I don't think it was, and I think you see that too. I think it was the most times a team has been given a first down on a penalty in the playoffs ever, tied with the Titans a couple years ago or whenever that was. So I think they called the game extremely tight. There were some calls that, maybe were a little soft as far as what they decided to do there, but it didn't decide the outcome of the game. At the end of the day, I think on every single one of them, there's the argument that it was a penalty. You can't be that mad at the refs in this one.
Look, officiating could have been better, but there was nothing egregious besides maybe that first Devontae Smith catch, which should have been challenged by Kyle Shanahan. But where there was egregious officiating was the AFC Championship game. And I'm not one to say, the game's rigged, because it's not. But officials can have a real impact on games, and the officials had an impact on this game. There were enough penalties which went against the Bengals at bad times where I think, hey, neutral site, neutral refs, better officiating, this game maybe ends up differently. 3-point game with terrible calls going primarily against the Bengals. You gotta talk about it. Obviously, Burrow didn't play well. Obviously, Mahomes was the entire offense. They couldn't get a run game going against the Bengals defense, so Mahomes had to sling it. And obviously, that scramble at the end of the game, pretty clear penalty, maybe a little bit of a flop, but still, you can't be hitting the quarterback out of bounds. But just looking at some of the stuff, that grounding on Joe Burrow was not grounding. That was very close to his his running back's feet. There's no call there. There's no argument to be made there. That was so close to the running back. That can't be called grounding. Then you got to look at the block in the back on that punt return. It's a pretty clear block in the back. That gets called, that punt punt return, wiped off the board. Chiefs are in much worse starting field position. Maybe they don't drive down there and get that field goal. The play being blown dead and still allowed to transpire. The Chiefs getting a redo on third down. That makes no sense. That was not blown dead. There was nothing to stop the play there. They let it play out and say, oh, the Chiefs didn't pick it up. We're going to run a redo. That's horrible. That's terrible officiating. You've got to take control of that, actually stop the play. I didn't hear a whistle. No one on the field heard a whistle because they were still going at it. And finally, this one's not as important. That MVS first down, I kind of think he was down before he reached the ball back, but that's ticky-tack. The other three are pretty clearly an issue.
Now, if you've seen my TikTok on this game, you already know the gist of what I'm going to say, but I think it's the Bengals fans complaining about this one are ridiculous. You didn't lose because of the refs, and I'll address the penalties Isaiah just brought up in a second, but just take a look at how you played. Joe Burrow threw 2 interceptions. Not good interceptions, bad throws, bad decisions. Then you're playing Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, who can't run, can't scramble, can't use one of the best elements of his game at playing the quarterback position, and you allow him to throw for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kadarius Toney leaves with an ankle injury. Juju Smith-Schuster leaves the game with an injury. McCole Hardman leaves the game with an injury. Can you imagine what Bengals fans would be saying if Joe Burrow was playing with a high ankle sprain and only had Jamar Chase to throw to? Maybe Hayden Hurst is out there. They'd be losing their minds, making excuses all over the place, but Patrick Mahomes went out there and got it done. At the end of the day, Joe Burrow did not play great. The defense did not play great as well. They let Patrick Mahomes go up and down the field on him. And if he didn't have that weird fumble where the ball fell out of his hands, you also don't even have a shot at coming back. So complaining about the refs when you also played that bad, to me is just searching for excuses. Now to the penalties Isaiah brought up specifically.
Can I address something first before you get into that? I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say, oh, Mahomes was hauled by an ankle injury. He couldn't run. The final play of the game, he had a great scramble, which put them in field goal range. That penalty put him even more in field goal range, but with Harrison Butker, a little 10-yard scramble, that set up the game winner. So Mahomes, legs were still part of the game plan. Maybe not as big a part, but they were still there.
They were not part of the game plan. I mean, there was that one time where he was looking to scramble. If it was normal, he was healthy, he would have just ran for the first down, accelerated for 15 yards, got the first down. Instead, he kind of hesitated, got hit from behind, tried to throw it to, I think it was Jerick McKinnon. I don't know if it was him or Isaiah Pacheco. He got 15 yards, but then it was ruled it was sacked down 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So that played a significant factor in the game, and to not acknowledge that is a little ridiculous. And on the last play, stop cutting me off, please. On the last play, it's not like he's having to cut. He runs straight up the field. There's no juking and dodging like he sometimes does. There's no misdirection. He has a clear lane, run straight. If you've ever had an ankle injury, which I know you've had, I know I've had, and this is my opinion on it, I'm not going to necessarily speak for you. It is way easier to run straight forward on an ankle injury than it is to make a cut, which is what he had to do. So now I want to address the penalties. You talked about the intentional grounding. It was clearly intentional grounding. The running back is past the line of scrimmage in front of the offensive line. The ball doesn't even make it past the offensive line. It's behind the offensive line, behind the line of scrimmage. By the rule book, that is intentional grounding. If that's the one you're going to argue
that's
about,
not ground.
I don't know what to tell you. That's by the book, and now there's not much else to argue behind that. Watch the play for yourself if you're listening to us. In my opinion, that's intentional grounding. By the rule, that's intentional grounding, the way I read the rule. Now, the block in the back call on the punt return, if I had to error one way or another, I'm probably going block in the back, but I don't think it was the most egregious block in the back call we've ever seen. It was more of a screen than a block in the back. He didn't full out run into him. There was an element of flopping there if we're going to give Patrick Mahomes an element of flopping. So that was present there as well. And if Bengals fans, when you're playing the Ravens, you don't get an automatic fumble return for a touchdown if Mark Andrews doesn't get shoved down from the back as he's trying to chase down the play. That wasn't called as well. So there's that going on there. Now with the play blown dead, when they go to the overhead camera view, you see the ref running onto the field as the play is starting. You think they're not trying to blow the whistle? He's going to be running onto the field like a free safety trying to knock down someone running a dig route. That's not what would be happening. So clearly that ref was trying to stop the play, just wasn't able to before the ball was thrown. So that's my perspective on that. And on the MVS first down, I think it was a first down. Was it close? Yes. Who knows? But to complain about the refs or Bengals fans, I think it's such a cope at this point.
You realize Joe Burrow was getting hit on that grounding call, right? Like he had someone hitting it in the chest while he was releasing that ball, hit the motion a little bit, threw it off, but he was still going at a receiver, short-armed it. If you're getting hit, it's not ground. It's an errant pass because there's a 280-pound man trying to knock you to the ground. The block in the back, yeah, I think we're kind of in the same boat on that. Miscall-ish. One way or the other, it was borderline, but still with everything else, can't possibly help them. And you're an NFL referee. If the center can't see you and the ball gets snapped and you've got a whistle, why are you not blowing that thing as hard as you can? Refs can stop plays if they want to. They can stop plays after they've already started. They didn't stop that play. They let that play go when the Chiefs didn't pick it up and said, okay, well, we actually were trying to stop it. You have to realize how that looks to Bengals fans. That they essentially were awarded a down. And no, I'm by no means saying the Bengals played well. But the refs played a direct outcome on this game, and to say they didn't is disingenuous. And the fact we're even having to talk about it this much is a bad sign on the NFL. There should not be debates going on about, oh, well, the referees did this, did that, did X, Y, and Z. We should be talking about how great Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes are, how great Chris Jones played, how it'd be amazing if they had Penei Sewell right tackle instead of Jamar Chase, because anyone can torch the Bengals secondary for 75 yards, but not many people can block Chris Jones around the end. We should be talking about that. The officials played an outcome of this game.
Well, I think when you see the ref running onto the field and you're playing in what is documented as the loudest stadium in the NFL, that's a fact based on our scientific measurements in the decibel levels. It is going to be harder to hear a whistle coming from 20 yards down the field. Now, I don't know why he was running onto the field. I don't know why he was trying to stop the play, but he clearly was. I don't think the decision was made because they saw the play happen and want to give the Chiefs a second chance. I don't really see the argument for that there. Now, was it weird? Have we really seen that before? No, but like I said, it's an AFC championship. It's almost the highest level of football. It's the highest level of football we're going to see outside of the Super Bowl. It's that loud. Refs running onto the field. You can see it from the overhead camera. That's at least my perspective on that one.
Yeah, they're X, Y, and Z. The officiating could have been better at points. Would you agree with that?
In both games, the officiating just, it felt off. And I think that people forget about is officials are humans. They're never going to be perfect. I felt like in general, the 49ers-Eagles game was called very tight. And in the Bengals game, it was called tight as well. But the way it played out was a little different. Also due to some of the circumstances and how close the score was.
Called tight for one side. But I will say I'll give the Chiefs a lot of credit. I already mentioned this in my first spiel. Mahomes played great. Not as mobile as he was, still able to step up in the pocket, still be able to freeze defenders, get his guys open 10, 15 yards downfield with his mobility, but not as mobile as we've seen him before, and still was able to do that against what people tell me is an elite defense. I think the Chiefs' O-line played pretty well too. They didn't allow that much pressure on Patrick Mahomes. I think we need to give them credit, and that'd be a very encouraging sight for me as a Chiefs fan going into the Super Bowl against a good defensive front seven in the Eagles. Maybe not a great one, but hey.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the Eagles-Chiefs matchup next week when we give our Super Bowl predictions, but I don't have that much else to say about it. I think if you're a Bengals fan, I think we should leave that game wishing Joe Burrow played better, wishing they executed better on offense. They should have put up way more points than they did, but they didn't get the job done, and Chris Jones took over. Chris Jones this season, by the way, has been phenomenal. If I can put this out there, Aaron Donald-esque with how good he's been at defensive tackle on that Chiefs interior, because I know, complete sidetrack here. I'm going in a completely different direction. But on top of it, the Chiefs lost their best corner in L'Jarius Sneed, the best member of their secondary. So they were ravaged by injury in this game. And you're going to complain about the refs. Complain about your team just not playing good enough. I know I went a completely different direction after going down one thought path, but I remembered that there as well. So
I do think it's important to note, since we're remembering things, I don't like any of these teams. The one team I cared for was the 49ers in this one, and they got beaten by mitigating circumstances, much like the Bengals. I don't like the Chiefs, Bengals, or Eagles. I have no dog in this fight besides hoping they go the Michael Vick way, but still, this is it's an unfortunate weekend to be sure.
Well, luckily we don't have to deal with Bengals fans anymore after this whole saga and debacle with whatever happens on TikTok. Maybe I get a 500K banger out of this one.
Sadly, the Eagles fans are worse, but we don't need to get into that. Chiefs fans might be worse than them too. We just haven't seen them at a Super Bowl in a while. Anyway.
That has been our reactions to the conference championship games. Let us know what your reactions were down in the comments below. Are you a salty Bengals fan? Are you a salty 49ers fan who are unhappy with the refs? If you're an NFL fan in general, what do you think of the refereeing experiences? If you want to use Underdog Fantasy, use our code THICK, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and we will see you either later this week with a video or next week with our predictions. Peace out. Thank you. Goodbye.